What's up, my fellow Shield Brothers? Shield Brother 6 here with yet another weekly dose of history. And today, on this February 15th, we will be talking about the trial, execution of Socrates. I'll also be giving you a very brief summary of Socrates, since he is such an in-depth person who did so much for philosophy and Western thinking. Let's get started for today. The reasoning for this trial. The trial of Socrates was held to determine the philosopher's guilt of two charges, the first one being asebeia, or impiety, against the pantheon of Athens, the Athenian gods. And also, he was charged with the corruption of the youth of the city-state. Here's the background on Socrates, which is, there's a sculpture of him top left. Socrates was a classical Greek philosopher, credited as one of the founders of Western philosophy and as being the first moral philosopher of the Western ethical tradition of thought. Before Socrates was tried for moral corruption and impiety, the citizens of Athens knew him as an intellectual and moral gadfly of their society. Socrates described himself as the gadfly of Athens, which, like a sluggish horse, needed to be aroused with his stinging. He made the bold claim that he is the god's gift to the Athenians. Socrates' eclectic method was often imitated by the young men of Athens. The support for oligarchic rule and the contempt for the Athenian democracy. According to the portraits left by some of Socrates' followers, Socrates himself seems to have openly espoused certain anti-democratic views, most prominent perhaps being that view that is not majority opinion that yields correct policy, but rather genuine knowledge and professional competence, which is possessed by only a few. Which you can't be doubting on him for that one, because he's got a good point. Those who have more experience are more equipped to rule than the majority. Plato also portrays him as being severely critical of some of the most prominent and well-respected leaders of the Athenian democracy, and even has him claim that the officials selected by the Athenian system of governance cannot credibly be regarded as benefactors, since it is not any group of many that benefits, but only some of one person or very few. You can see where some of these people might back some of these falsified charges against Socrates because of his views and his thoughts. The sources that I am basing this on are the primary source accounts of the trial and execution of Socrates, which are the Apology of Socrates by Plato and the Apology of Socrates to the Jury by Xenophon of Athens, who was his student. Contemporary interpretations include the Trial of Socrates, 1988, by the journalist I.F. Stone, and Why Socrates Died, Dispelling the Myths, 2009, by the classic scholar Robin Waterfield. Top left, you can see another bust of Socrates. The trial. The prosecution speech by Anytus, which condemned Socrates for his political and religious activities in Athens before the year of 403 BC. In presenting such a prosecution, which addressed matters external to the charges of moral corruption and impiety, for which the Athenian polis were trying Socrates. Anytus violated the political amnesty granted in the Agreement of Reconciliation from 403 to 402 BC. This granted amnesty to a man for political and religious actions taken before or during the rule of the 30 tyrants, which I might do a video on later, under which all further charges and official recriminations concerning the reign of terror were forbidden. So, under this, Socrates shouldn't have even been able to be tried because of this amnesty given to all of the citizens of Athens at that time. The prosecutor of the trial of Socrates proposed the death penalty for the impious philosopher. In the event, friends, followers, and students all encouraged Socrates to flee Athens, actions which the citizens expected. Yet, on principle, Socrates refused to flout the law and escape his legal responsibility to Athens. Therefore, faithfully to his teachings of civic obedience to the law, the 70-year-old Socrates executed his death sentence, and drank the hemlock as condemned by trial. As a man, he could have fled, and his followers are expecting him to do so, but on his beliefs and on his teachings, and to make a point, he did not. The result. The death sentence of Socrates was the legal consequence of asking political philosophic questions of his students, from which resulted the two accusations of moral corruption and impiety. At trial, the majority of the dicasts, or male citizens, jurors were chosen by lot, which were used at the time, as legal normalcies go, voted to convict him of the two charges, and then, consistent with common legal practice, they voted to determine his punishment, and they agreed to a sentence of death to be executed by Socrates drinking a poisonous beverage of hemlock. Although it is written that less than 3/5 of those jurors agreed to him being guilty, and even less than that agreed to the death penalty, and even even the man who was charging him did not want him to have the death penalty. The picture top left is the death of Socrates, 1787, by Jacques-Louis David, which depicts him giving one last speech on his deathbed. The execution. The Conium maculatum, or the hemlock, or poisonous hemlock, is a highly poisonous biennial herbaceous flowering plant in the carrot family, which native to Europe and North Africa. Following the trial of Socrates, he drank a poisonous beverage of hemlock, which would have been a hemlock, grinded up, mashed up, and then kind of brewed, kind of like a wine, sort of. A very poisonous wine. The Death of Socrates. This is a picture called The Death of Socrates by Walter Crane with this inscription below. He drank the contents as though it were a draught of wine, taking his death with dignity and the intelligence that he had upheld his entire life. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something today. And thus ended the great life of Socrates, one of the greatest men to ever live. And as always, I'll catch you next time.